What's up, boss? This is Abraham's wallet. We span the gap between the austerity of obedience to God and the prosperity rising from faithfulness. Run your home and your dough like a biblical boss. Just spinning some QT. That's at a Breve. Quality time out here in the treehouse today. Here's the forest of the treehouse. There's the side of the treehouse. Here's my house. Today, I've got a special treat for you. If you recall that this summer, when Mark and I went to Texas on our road trip, we had a hangout night with Abe's Wallet dudes. That night, I met a wonderful man named Johnny. I wish I could flip the camera around so you could see my dog way down below, but I don't know how to do that. I was fascinated by Johnny because in short order, I found he has a heart for the Lord. He has successfully built a family over decades. I honor anybody along the way who's trying to piece together a godly plan, as I am. But I also really like for us to see some people who've done it. They actually did it from beginning to finish, and they get to experience some of the fruits of that success. So I think that's helpful for us to look at these graybeards. I've said about myself that I like to collect graybeards. The scripture says there's wisdom in hanging around wise people, and it would be smart of us to intentionally do so. So I'm collecting Johnny Phipps for you. Here's some really rich stuff just about how Johnny put his family together. So I'll throw it over. Which way would that be? This way. I'm gonna throw it over to the future. Here's our convo. Now then.
Hi, Stephen.
You're coming to me from sunny Arlington, Texas, which is somewhere between the Dallas and the Fort Worth of Dallas-Fort Worth.
But we say Fort Worth, Dallas. I don't say Dallas, Fort Worth.
I see. I appreciate that.
The interview's over if you give Dallas prominence. We're out of here.
Okay, because you're a Fort Worth boy.
Well, like Amon Carter, one of the founders of Fort Worth, used to say, Fort Worth is where the West begins.
Yes.
Dallas is where the East peters out.
Well, I know that when I want to see longhorns crossing the road, I head to the Fort Worth stockyards, and also a great rodeo there.
Amen.
Johnny, we want to learn a little bit about your life. How would you contrast the way that you were raised to the family that you ended up leading?
Well, I think there's not that much contrast. I think I think our family, my family, was modeled very much after the way I was raised.
Okay. I would venture a guess that you had to work harder and swim upstream to maintain the kind of family that you were raised in, whereas it was more normative when you were a child.
You're very wise, Stephen. I mean, my childhood was very Leave It to Beaver.
Uh-huh.
If your listeners have any clue of what
Right. We might have to insert some footage so they would understand what that is.
Boy, Beaver, wait till the guys find out you're hanging around with a girl. Boy, they'll really give you the business.
But gee, Wally, you hang around with girls, and the guys don't give you the business.
Well, that's because I'm in high school. You can do a lot of stuff in high school without getting the business.
I mean, I was very much a Leave It to Beaver, stay home mom. Dad got up with the lunch kit with the coffee thermos.
Yes.
Went to work in the station wagon every day, and I was home with mom.
Okay, so now take us to your early married years and some of the decisions that you made that would have far-reaching implications that you're still benefiting from today.
Julie was raised different than me. She was raised with a stay-home mom and a working dad. but not a Christian home as I was. You know, I would hear my mom and dad at the end of the hall, the other end of the hall, praying and reading the Bible at night.
Wow.
Every night.
What a blessing.
Oh my gosh. And Julie, you know, no, not at all. The only time she heard Jesus was, you know,
As an invective.
when the lawnmower broke.
Yes.
You know, her dad would call on Jesus. When we first got married, Stephen, we both kind of looked at each other and said, "Do you want kids?" Man, I don't know. Do you want kids?
Right.
And we were double income dinks, is what they were called back in the day.
Yeah.
Double income, no kids. And went on lots of Caribbean and ski vacations and enjoyed our two incomes. And then we had a Christian financial seminar at our church back in '85. We'd been married 2 years. And we were kind of roommates because we were both working full time, and I was in advertising, working in Dallas. You know, 12-hour days were the norm because of the commute and because of the job. And Julie was a controller at a company and working on her CPA, trying to get that, going to school at night, and blah, blah, blah. We were roommates very much. And man, my wife just about had a nervous breakdown. Something's got to change. And this seminar came up at about that time. It was a guy named Wayne Coleman. It was called Obedience, the Key to Prosperity. And it was
Okay, I like it.
Principles about no debt and that kind of thing, and you know, emergency fund and baby steps and all that kind of stuff. And we made a decision that summer that Julie was going to quit her job. There's no kids yet. She was going to quit her job, be a homemaker, take care of our home, cook, you know, let me go to work and concentrate on work. And she took care of everything else. And we made that decision in the summer of '85. And life changed. I think I told you about that decision. That was a $1 million minimum decision we made.
It was as if you were at one of those railroad switching stations and you got on a completely different track for the next 50 years of your life.
Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting that this decision was made before you had children and before the mechanics of the house necessitated her being at home. You guys made a decision. We want her heart at home.
Yes.
And I'm reading a book right now called Family Fortunes. The subtitle is How to Build Family Wealth and Hold On to It for 100 Years by Will and Bill Bonner.
That's Billy the kid's name. Bonner was his real name.
Oh, all right.
Wow, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So this book, which I'm sure we're going to review on this podcast at some point because I'm fascinated by it and really like it, but they go into more depth than you would expect, talking about the matriarch role. And that if you want to build short-term luxury, then what you should do is maximize income, and everybody should work and make money if that's your goal. But if your goal is building a long-lasting family, and I like to quote the Bible saying, whose name will never be removed from the earth. If you're trying to build a family, then the matriarch role is of utmost importance. That there is a relationship aspect to maintaining heartstrings, to working, not just somebody like a man would do to declare a value. Oh, we have this value of thrift, but to take those values and inch by inch and step by step to build them into children, to let them see what that looks like in the grocery store, clipping coupons, for instance. to do the work of navigating interpersonal conflict, to do the work of, you know, how many times I tell my children, you have to tell your children over and over, this is your best friend and this will be your best friend for your whole life. You know, you have to ingrain that into children's hearts. And that role of matriarch, one, sets the man free to go really pursue income and go pursue a career in ways that will be really demanding of him at certain points and stressful. And they take up all of your brain space and all of your emotional space sometimes. But if you're trying to do a halfway job because, you know, I've also got to go home and I've got to deal with all the home problems, instead of going, know what, I've got an expert in that world that takes care of me and everybody else on that front, blah, blah, blah. I'm just trying to expand on that simple little decision that you said that you and Julie made, that she would stay home. It's a profound decision.
Amen.
Anything else you want to say about that until you get to the math, which I am interested in?
Well, I mean, I'm all over that. I mean, I could have written that book 30 years ago because, I mean, part of that decision, Stephen, was based on biblical values. I was raised with a mom like that. Part of it was based on the mental health of my wife at the time. It just wasn't fair for her to work all day, and she had a controller's job, an important job.
Yeah. And
then trying to study for this CPA exams. You're probably familiar with those.
Yep.
I mean, she was losing it. And our marriage, it wasn't suffering, but we had no intimacy. We were both putting on the pants and getting up, and we spent nights, weekends running errands and taking care, you know.
Yeah.
And it had, our decision, like you said, was pre-kids, had nothing to do with kids. It had everything to do with our marriage, sanity. How does God want our family to look? What does Julie's role need to be? What does my role need to be? And, you know, fast forwarding, what came out of that is Julie, JB, who I call her, Julie Bell, she took care of home. She took care of errands. I took care of work. It wasn't chauvinistic. It wasn't, honey, you just stay home and you just iron and putz around. And no, I mean, her job was 10 times harder than mine.
Yeah.
Especially when you factor in kids.
Yeah.
But it allowed me, Stephen, like you said, like this book says, I could concentrate on providing for our family, and I could give my employer, which was only right, I could give them 110%, not 80% because my mind's at home.
Yeah.
Or I'm thinking about errands at lunch, or I got to buy the cleaners, or I got to call the electric company.
Yep.
My employer 110%, and I advanced in my career. I got raises. I got more responsibility. I got more stress. I got more hours. But I knew that home was okay.
Yes.
Especially, you know, fast forwarding with kids. And when I came home, there wasn't errands to run. It was family time. Whenever I got home, we had time for each other. We had Saturdays, if I had them off, for each other, because our delineation of duties was very clear, and we felt very biblical, not chauvinistic. I don't want her job, Stephen.
Right.
Let me put on the pants and go to work.
Right. Let
me fight the traffic. I'd rather do that than I could not be a stay-home mom, a stay-home dad.
Yeah.
No. So anyway, I'm all over that. Like I said, I think I could have wrote that book that came 30 years later that you just are talking about.
Yeah. And tell me, well, I'll just make this point because I'm trying to imagine people's objections even to hearing this. You know, Adam named Eve the mother of the living. And there's something about the nature of a woman that's different than the nature of a man. So I will, if anybody wants to hang me on this, I'll tie the noose myself and say men and women are not interchangeable. And our society wants to treat men and women as if, well, you can do whatever role you want. I mean, what you can negotiate amongst yourselves. What roles would you like? What roles would I like? And then we'll just do the jobs that we feel the most comfortable with. And if a man feels the most comfortable at home with the babies, that's fine. And if a woman feels most comfortable or she has a higher earning potential than the man, then great. I'll just say men and women are not interchangeable. And the roles that God has made us for, we don't have to feel like we like them. That actually has nothing to do with it. Whether you feel like you like the roles or not, you should learn to like the role that God has given you as a husband and a wife, because he's created a team. So if you're tall, if you're 6'11" and you want to play basketball, you should feel comfortable, get comfortable playing on the inside. Just get comfortable doing it, because that's what your body is saying. Put me on the inside. Yeah. So
how'd you know how tall my wife is?
Yes.
Just kidding.
That's what drew you to her in the first place. Now, tell us the math. You put pencil to paper and said, I thought about this decision for her to not work.
Well, at the time, that wasn't on the radar. But in hindsight, looking back, because we have facilitated and taught financial peace classes for 20 years at church. And it's funny how this math came up later. And I got to thinking about that decision back in 1985 that we made for Julie to stay home, because back in 85, we were both making high 40s. We were both making like 47.5, call it $50,000, which was a dang good salary in 1985.
Sure.
What's the equivalent of that now? 250? Who knows? And then I thought, this was 10 years ago when I kind of did this math. 30 years of Julie not working, 30 years of not putting her $50,000 living off one income, which we did. 30 years of not putting her $50,000 in the bank. Do the math. I mean, no raises, no compounded interest, just simple math. What's 30 times 5? That's $1.5 million.
Yep.
That we didn't have because of the decision.
Right.
For her to come. Put in some compound interest, put in some raises. We're talking $3, $4, $5 million, because we lived and we're going to live on one income. That was a $1 million decision, easy money in the simplest of math.
Yep.
And zero regret. Could I use another $1 million now? Does a bear poop in the woods?
Yeah, right.
Sure.
Sure.
But our quality of life, her role, like you were referencing, you couldn't buy it for $1 million.
That's right.
I couldn't replace her for $1 million. If I had to go put out a resume, put out a job description, I need this person for the next 30 years of my life, I couldn't have got it for $1 million.
Yeah. And just to make the point, she had a lot of skill, a lot of intelligence, and a lot of training to do what she was doing. So it was a sacrifice for her to say, I'm burning those ships. And I'm saying that career that I trained for and prepared for, and I became a high earner, I'm letting it go. And that's not insignificant. And I think that a lot of people think, well, if I'm a woman who's 30 or around there, and I've worked and trained to have a career, well, of course I could never let it go. I mean, I trained for this, or we took out loans for me to be in this position. But what you're saying is what you found in the value of raising a family was inestimable. You couldn't put a dollar amount to what you experienced in your marriage and in your family life.
Well, 2 things, to comment on that. The quality of life, forgive me, but we had a Leave It to Beaver kind of life on Trail Lake Drive, which is where I'm sitting right now, with Julie being a stay-home mom. And little did we know, later on, I would start my own business, a one-man advertising graphic design company, and her skills were invaluable. Again, she took on that part of the business, the accounting, the payables, the receivables, the taxes, all that. So I could concentrate on clients, on projects, doing my job, and I didn't have to jack with the accounting end of our business. She took care, because she loved it. She liked spreadsheets. I like coloring sheets.
Huge.
I mean, and I could do my coloring sheets all day, bill clients money for it. She could take care of the accounting so that I didn't have to do it every night and on weekends like most guys would do that were doing what I. And she was filling her happy place because she likes ledgers. She's old school with the big giant ledger with the 17 columns. God had that in mind.
The soundbite for what Julie did is that modern culture would demean her for staying at home and helping her own family and helping you in your business, but would champion her to go out into the world and help someone else's family.
Yeah.
That is to serve another man somewhere and help his bottom line and help his business. But what she did was she brought all of those skills, all of those talents, all of that training, and she brought them to you and said, how can I help what you're trying to do for our family? Which is a massive difference. You could have hired somebody to do the same work, but that we're talking about heartstrings. We're talking about relationship here. And so for her to bring all of that intelligence and that talent and that skill and invest it back into you, ergo her own home, is a beautiful thing.
Well, and for decades, Stephen, her friends have asked her, what do you do all day?
Uh-huh.
How do you not get up and go to work? What do you do all day? And I mean, Julie would answer that with, I can't even get done every day what I need to get done. And she's been doing it for 40 years now. To be the provider.
Yes. So what was the next important thing that you saw in the formation of your family?
Well, the raising the kids. We decided, of course, we wanted kids. And boy, when we decided, boom, the next week she's pregnant, of course, which is fine. And it was just so special because I wasn't in my own business then. I was working at an ad agency in Dallas, the 12-hour days, and she could take care of home. She could take care of nurturing that child. But the great thing about it was when I got home from work, whenever it was, sometimes late, sometimes on time, I didn't think about work. I turned on the dad role, the husband role. I'd walk in the front door, she'd hand the kid to me and go, welcome home, honey. You're on.
Yeah.
And, and I would take off my coat and tie and put on my dad clothes and wrestle on the floor, change diapers, do baths, do Bible stories, read, sing, whatever.
Yes.
And I loved it because I could forget about work. She could shift gears and take care of supper, the chauvinistic world that we Leave It to Beaver. I'd come home and she'd have on her pearls. Yeah, right. And a side note of that, Stephen, one thing that we had to address was, I was at an ad agency in Dallas and the girls there were dressed to the nines every day.
Right.
And Julie knew that, but she had to trust. I had to give her confidence that she was all the woman I ever needed, because I was around great looking women 8, 9, 10, 12 hours a day because they were putting on their best to go to work, because people dressed up for work back then. They didn't wear, hoodies and pajama pants
Yes.
like they do now. Give me a break. Get me started.
Yep.
And I had to, because when I got home, she didn't look like the women that I left an hour ago in Dallas.
Yep.
She looked like she'd been at home all day messing with a kid and hadn't got to look in the mirror and put on her makeup yet.
Sure.
But I have to hand it to Julie. She did her best to spruce up a little bit and put on the happy face when she knew that I was coming in and walking in through the kitchen door. And I love that because I know she cared about it. But at the same time, she had to put her hope, faith, and trust in the Lord and in me to be a one-woman man, which I was, and I have been, and I never have waited. But part of it is she had to put in some kind of effort.
That's such a great little side point and I appreciate you saying it, because it's so foreign to 2022 culture.
Yeah.
The idea right now is you must love me for me. And the way that I present myself is 100% about self-expression. It's about me and the way that I want to feel and what makes me comfortable. And if we have the wisdom to look backwards at successful marriages, we'll see, as you said, the word was, why wouldn't I just make some effort? And Paul says in 1 Corinthians 7, he makes it very clear that the way that we manage our bodies should have our spouses in mind. So right now, Mark is growing a comical, it's just one man's opinion, comical mustache. When the question comes, why are you growing a mustache? The answer comes, my wife likes it. So that's a good answer. Whether you are doing chest workouts or trying to get rid of the spare tire for your wife's sake, you should do so. And if a wife realizes, oh, my husband's coming home, it's not chauvinistic and backwards for her to go, I'm going to just look in the mirror for 2 minutes, put my hair in order, whatever else she wants to do, to think, I'm making an effort for my spouse. We talk about, we used to talk about, I don't really hear this talked about much anymore, but the regular pursuing of your spouse and the regular winning of their affections. And that more is the thought that I should presume upon their affections and I should presume that I have their heart, as opposed to, no, it's actually on me to win my wife's heart regularly and to show her kindness and consideration. And anyways, yours was a generation that wasn't embarrassed by that idea. And I think it's really noble.
To some people, it may seem very chauvinistic, but I
think
of
course.
I really do. I think it's biblical.
Yeah.
And I think it's only fair for me to look my best for my wife. But before that, I mean, this is the temple, and I'm supposed to take care of it. I want to be around a long time for my kids, my grandkids, maybe my great-grandkids someday.
Yes.
So I got to take care of that for them and for my wife. And I'm doing it selfishly because I want her to stay healthy, to stay in shape, to stay trim, because I like my wife, and I like to look at my wife. I've counseled young men and young dads, young husbands for years and years, because God put that on my heart, men and boys. And I tell young men, young husbands, and I tell young wives, your greatest defense, a husband's greatest defense against addiction, against porn, against sexual immorality is his wife. And if I'm talking to the wife, I look at her and I say, your husband's greatest defense is you. And you owe it to your husband to look your best, to make his eyes want to go to you.
Wow.
Don't give your husband a reason to look somewhere else because you're not taking care of yourself. That's not fair.
That's
Because
great.
God made your husband visual. Sorry, ladies. He made your husband visual. And so you need to play up to that. You need to take advantage of that. You need to give him a weapon, a defense weapon against the sexual immorality in this world. And his best weapon is you.
That's great.
If you're hot and you're in shape and you're sexy, if your husband's pretty normal, he's going to notice that. And he's going to turn to you first.
Yes.
And you know as well as I do, Stephen, men are microwaves, women are crock pots. It's a physiological difference. We have a buildup that occurs in us that women don't get.
Yeah.
And that's the way God made us. We got to have a release. I mean, jokingly in our house, we call it, an oil change, a maintenance. I'm sorry, but it's the truth. It's the way God made us.
Expand on that, because I've heard that, but I think probably many of our listeners haven't. What do you mean when you say men are a microwave and women are a crock pot?
Well, it takes a man about 3.5 seconds to get stimulated. It can be a commercial on TV. It can be a girl that walks by. It can be preferably his wife walks by and boom, there's stimulation, there's excitement. He's ready.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about you, but I think maybe there's negative 1.5% women that have ever been created that function that way.
Yes.
I know there's a few, but a woman she's got a lot on her mind. She takes relaxation. She takes manipulation. She takes a good massage. She takes whatever, a candle, soft music, a nice dinner. What's it take us? 2.5 seconds and a coupon from Arby's. I mean, we're ready to go.
It takes one button on the shirt that has accidentally come undone. That's all it takes for us.
Boom. And I'm thankful for the way God made me.
Uh-huh.
I want to talk to him when I get there, because God, why the 180-degree contrast between how you made me and how you made my wife?
Yeah.
But it's okay. We've, 40 years of marriage next year. We've worked through that. We have an understanding.
Awesome.
I think about it 10 times more than she does. We're both aware of that. It's almost a joke sometimes. We have an analogy in our house that relates to nature. It relates to are you familiar with a garden spider? You have those?
No.
The big, giant, black and yellow. They're about this big with their legs fully.
No.
The technical name is an argiope, but they're garden spiders. They're black and yellow. And all you ever see is the female, because the female builds a beautiful nest up in the eaves of your house about now. They're building them. And then she is there patient. She waits. The male is a fraction of the size of the female, which I don't really understand, but that's kind of common in nature.
Yes.
He comes up, when he's in the mood, he comes up to the edge of the web and kind of makes the web vibrate.
Okay.
It, which sends a signal to the female that's sitting in the middle of the web. If she's in the mood, score. He does his business. He's out of there. She stays, builds the egg sac. If she's not in the mood, she eats him.
Oh.
She eats him. He's hosed. So we kind of have a little saying around our house about, about shaking the web or that kind of thing. It's a little thing we have between my wife and I about the web, because she's familiar with the garden spider too. And it's pretty hilarious. It's pretty cruel. It's pretty sad.
The web is shaken very gingerly, knowing one's life is in one's hands.
Tentative web stimulation.
Yes.
But Stephen, I mean, I can't imagine the the numbers of married couples who don't have a great intimate relationship. I know it's staggering, and which leads to divorce, which leads to infidelity, which leads to pornography. It's just so sad because God created sex for marriage. The marriage bed is pure. The marriage bed is whatever you want to do that both of you are okay with. You know, I'm not talking about bringing in monkeys and chainsaws. I'm just talking about whatever makes your wife happy and feels good, whatever makes you happy and feels good. You're both good with it. Okay. We're so blessed that we communicated about that. Have we had our ups, have we got cross? Sure we had. But we've addressed that and realized that God made me the way I am. God made Julie the way she is. We got to work this out. And it's in the best interest of our marriage. It's in the best interest of my fidelity and my one woman man that I want to be, that oil changes are just part of life. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's dinner and candlelight, and sometimes it's the 15-minute Jiffy Lube job because you got to be at church in 45 minutes and that's all there's time for. You can edit that out, buddy, but that's the way God designed it and us. And
what you're making me think of as you're talking, Johnny, is I appreciate you being frank, because it's definitely true. We know that it's statistically true that sexual alienation among spouses is super common. And I think one of the roots of that is simply not talking the way that you're describing. Having honest conversations about, this is the way I am, this is the way that you are, and simply negotiating and talking about, listen, I want you to be happy. And I want us to work toward that end. I also don't want to be sexually frustrated because that leads to all sorts of darkness. And simply having those conversations, I think, is pretty rare. And if I can guess, I think it's rarer now than it was 40 years ago, because there's all sorts of dark holes that one can find to go into. And there's all sorts of hiding that we can do with our sex lives that was much more uncommon. If I just want to read this verse that you're referencing, it's Hebrews 13:4. It says, marriage is honorable among all, and the marriage bed is to be undefiled, kept pure. But fornicators and adulterers, God will judge. And so that keeping of the marriage bed pure is crucial, is integral to having a healthy, God-honoring marriage. And I'm glad you're pointing it out and talking about it a little bit.
Well, and I know we didn't, in our preamble and our pre-communication, we didn't even address talking about sex. It was more about family relationships and finances and that kind of thing. But man, if you don't have the sex part nailed down in marriage, you're hosed, because it is the essence, it's the very rawness of what God created man, created woman, cleave, become one.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing else matters if you ain't got that figured out. You can have all the money in China.
Yeah.
You can be the most successful guy on the planet, country club, big house, nice cars. But if y'all aren't transparent and communicating and being intimate, what do you got?
Yeah. When the Lord says the two shall become one flesh, he was being explicit. And that there was a book written years ago. This was probably early 80s, called The Act of Marriage. It was it was a sex book. And
I read it.
I think that was a great title, The Act of Marriage.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you and I could talk for days. I really do.
Yeah.
I really do. maybe we'll have to do this again. But I
Well,
feel like
it has dawned on me since we've been talking, Johnny, that this will be at least a part 1 and part 2. But I would like to we'll real quickly revisit that you mentioned Mr. Right brain artistic type. You taught financial peace, which was, people don't know what that is. It's a Christian way to get your finances under control. And it's something that everybody in the church can kind of go through and kind of get examined and kind of see this is where we're at and what are the steps we need to take. Can I ask why?
Julie has always listened as a stay-home mom, stay-home wife. She's always listened to talk shows, mostly Christian-based, faith-based talk shows for wisdom. I mean, focus on the family. Dobson helped us raise our kids.
Yep.
You know, just the Christian, biblical, and I should say biblical, Stephen, more than Christian, biblical wisdom about kids, about family, which trickled over into marriage, which trickled over into finances. And she ran across Dave Ramsey 25 to 30 years ago in his radio program, listened to him for several months and came to me and said, Johnny, I think you'd like this guy, because I was raised with biblical financial principles, not because of any marketing, but just because that's what mom and dad did. They had no debt. They had one income. We paid cash for stuff, but it had nothing to do with some marketing scheme or some program or some, they didn't have those back then. So I was raised that way, and I felt that way when we got married. I started listening to him, and then we found out that he had, like back then, a VCR series that you could teach at church. We looked into it, signed up for it, became coordinators, and started having, a couple of times a year. And we just fell in love with it. We saw what it did, Stephen, for people's lives. We saw what it did for the church. We saw what it did for marriage. And to touch on something that you mentioned a while ago, it made couples communicate.
Yes.
Because they could not go through the course successfully unless they talked about the lesson, unless they talked about the debt snowball, unless they talked about saving, unless they talked about credit cards. They had to communicate. They had to. Awesome marriage counseling tool. And, you say, well, me and right brain and, but it worked because Julie loved the financial structure, bookkeeping side of that course, keeping records, keeping track, keeping a check register. What's that? She's all over that.
Oh, yes.
And I was all over the people part of it, the visual part of it. I was the guy that, that drew this week's lesson on the dry erase board.
Yes.
Did funny things with Starburst and that kind of thing. I mean, we were our own case history because we had made that decision to go to one income many years in the past. We had made the $1 million decision. That idea came up because of facilitating FBU classes. You can do it. You can live on one income. No, you can't live like the guys next door.
Yes.
We made that decision years ago to not let our lifestyle increase with our income. We lived conservatively. Did we do without some things? Sure we did.
Yeah.
We didn't have a brand new car like the Smiths next door.
Yeah.
We didn't have a new house. We've been in this house for 30 years as of 2 months ago. Our house and our vehicles don't compare to our peers.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay. Our home life doesn't compare to our peers, our family life.
Rock on.
Compare. Like I said, Julie, what does your wife do all day? I don't know. She's busy. She never watches TV and eats bonbons.
Yep.
Busy. She does stuff. She takes care of our home. She takes care of our house. I fix things that break. I lift the heavy stuff because I'm stronger than she is. Well, she's better with numbers than I am. I got no problem with that.
Yeah, great.
So it was a great partnership, just like our marriage, in facilitating those classes. I think that was the original question.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just curious to me that you personally found importance in taking the people that you wanted to influence and the people that you wanted to save, if you'll allow me to use that word. You wanted to save them from trouble, and you thought, let's deal with finances for them. The scripture says where your treasure is, your heart's going to be there too. So when we open up somebody's checkbook, and now that is now, as you know, a metaphor because no one has checkbooks.
What do you call that?
When we open up someone's finances, we find what's important to them because that's where money goes. Just to put a bow on the end of this, we heard about the formation of your family and some value calls that you guys made early on. By the way, I want to throw in a proverb that comes to mind hearing you talk. It's Proverbs 24:3. By wisdom, a house is built, and understanding puts it in good order. So even you mentioning that Julie decided to leave her career before there were children in the home, what was really happening is that wisdom and understanding was putting your home in order. Your home was being constructed in a way that it could receive children, it could receive a new business, it could receive all of the decisions and challenges that were going to come your way because the spirit of wisdom, and his name is Jehovah, the spirit of wisdom was putting your home in order. So we talked about that establishment of your home. Let's just, before we end today, let's jump way to the end. And I will just ask you maybe some current goings on to prove your answer to this question. Did it work, Johnny?
Yeah, it's working every day, Stephen. I mean, sure, there's trials, sure, there's tribulations. You know, we have adult children, and that's a whole different thing than toddlers or teenagers. But God is faithful. Our children love the Lord and are following the Lord and are leading their families.
Incredible.
That, which is only God. Sure, we laid a foundation. We had our kids in church every Sunday. They heard the Bible stories, laid the foundation. I wouldn't trade for how they were raised. And we're seeing it now. And the Lord's just as much a part of our daily lives now as he was in all the different chapters that we've had. And, you know, it kind of freaks me out, Stephen. I'm going to be 67 on Monday. What happened? I was 27. Like last week.
Right.
Good night. But I can just see the Lord's hand and all these different things. And again, I feel like you and I could talk for hours about the things that the Lord has obviously done, obviously prepared us for, obviously orchestrated. At the time, it might seem like our world was falling apart when I lost my job of 10 years and I got 2 kids and a wife at home. We're going to have to live in a van down by the river.
You're living in a van down by the river.
But he was preparing. I love what you said a while ago. Never thought of it that way, of how God was preparing us by Julie leaving her career for our home to accept children, our home to accept ultimately a business, our home to accept multi-generational living. I had no clue of that. I was just trying to pay the light bill.
Yes.
You know, how are we going to do this? How can we buy it? We need a new car. But I like what you said about that, because we can look back. Man, it's so obvious what God was doing with the chess pieces that we couldn't see. Maybe thank goodness we couldn't see over the horizon. There's a reason there's a horizon. And only God can see over the horizon, but man can't. Because we couldn't handle it.
Did you have the story, Johnny, of your children dispersing and going to different parts of the country after they left your home?
Well, yeah, Bill went to China for 3.5 years. Meredith went to Bogota, Colombia for a year with her husband. God, what is going on here?
Yes.
We're doing the Leave It to Beaver thing. Remember?
Yeah, remember the
They
plan?
live in the same town. My son found his wife over there in China. It's all good. And you know as well as I do that my son lives that way about 150 feet. And my daughter lives that way about 100 yards, all the way from China and Colombia. And here we are on the same street, on the same cul-de-sac. I know that's another show, perhaps.
That's just how I just wanted to end today with the fact that you, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm projecting a lot of my past and experience onto you, but I don't think this language was much used 30 years ago, that you would have started out and say, we have a multi-generational family vision, but you had a vision for a godly family, and what you're living now is multi-generational family. You're in your grandchildren's lives on a daily basis. They live across the street from you. You
Sometimes
are
hourly.
Say, what's that?
Sometimes hourly.
Hourly. And it makes your eyes do funny things.
It's all right.
And you are part of the parenting story for your grandchildren. And the kind of American idea of when you live past your usefulness, that you will get shipped off and away and out of sight and out of mind. I don't think that's going to be the story for you and Julie, because you're building something multi-generationally that not only honors the children, as you have so much value that the whole family is here around you, but it also produces honor upstream. And the older members of the family, there's honor for them as well, because we see that family is so primary. We would sell our careers down the river for it. We would arrange all of our finances around honoring God in our homes, because that's the role that he's given us to play. I'm going to throw another proverb on top of you. And that is Proverbs 16:9. We've heard this one. In his heart, a man makes his plans, but the Lord directs his steps. When I first heard that in my younger days, it was presented to me as if, look, good luck making plans, because they're not going to work. And God is going to end up doing whatever he wants to do in your life. That's not what the proverb says. The proverb says, do make plans and have goals and have vision. And as you walk them out, the Lord is so good and faithful that he will interject and interrupt your plans if that's what he needs to do to be glorified in your life. And the plans that he likes, he will aid you in those plans, and they will come about in ways that you never knew that it was possible. So in his heart, a man makes his plans, and the Lord directs his steps. He enters in, he can edit, he can say, we don't need that. You thought that was important. It's not. And he weaves himself into the story. That's what I see for you, is that I don't know if you dreamed about what it would be like when you were 67. That feels like a mist to me. I think of grandparenting days with excitement, but I'm not able to put my mind around the specifics of what it will look like. But in your story, you and Julie had some prayers, visions, and dreams about which way you would go. And what you found was the Lord entered the story and has worked in ways you couldn't have imagined, so that your children they're on the same street with you. I mean, I find it profoundly amazing.
It is. We had no clue. That was my son-in-law's idea and dream. I have to hand it to Mike. That was
Mhm.
his. I didn't ever think about it, ever. I mean,
But
I just want them to live in the same county, you know.
yeah, sure. But you did pray for the son-in-law who would come to be.
Well, since Meredith was a little girl, I prayed for her mate, and since Bill was a little boy, I prayed for his mate. But God is so amazing, because I never even dreamed that Bill would get his wife from the other side of the planet. But she's the sweetest thing that ever happened to our family.
Amazing.
Yeah, I mean, who'd have thought? Who'd have thought my son would marry a girl from China? A sweet little. She's awesome. She's the best thing that ever happened to Bill. She
That's
speaks
great.
better English than Bill does.
That's great. Well, I haven't met Bill, but I've met Mike, and we thank God for Mike because he's the reason that I know you.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you for giving us a little window into the genesis of the family that you have led, and a little window into the way things are right now. We're going to revisit you, Johnny, and we're going to be talking about your family's unique relationship with land, as well as the business that you started and what all that was like. Can we do this again sometime soon?
At least once.
Okay. At least once. Good.
I mean, I'm thinking I could start a podcast, but I don't like computers enough to do that.
Yes. Well, I'm happy to give you and your stories and your wisdom as much of a platform as you need to get to scratch that itch, Johnny.
Okay. I look forward to breaking bread together sometime.